Well, thank you very much for coming, Mike.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can do
It's
this.
a pleasure.
So, as I mentioned, I want to tell you a bit about the story of my country. And to do so, I think it would be useful first to tell you a bit about the story that preceded the current moment of my country. So, a bit of the prehistory of the modern history.
Sure.
And in order to do that, okay, let's see, because it will also be useful to dispel some of the myths, or most people, everybody would agree to this. But in any case, so what I wanted to tell you first, maybe, is that so what happened in Venezuela before Chavez? We have an oil economy very dependent on what the price of oil is doing, and say, while oil prices are booming, our economy was doing well. In the 70s, we nationalized oil. So it was not Chavez that nationalized it. Maybe that's a myth we can dispel.
So can I just ask,
please.
Chavez enters when? At what point?
Yes, you're right. I should mention that. So Chavez enters in 1999.
1999, okay.
1999,
Okay.
88. 98 is when he's elected. 99, his tenure starts.
So he is elected through a democratic process.
Exactly.
That Venezuela has at that point.
Exactly. And I want to tell you a bit about what was the situation in the country that led up to him, because he definitely marks a before and after. And I think Venezuela was a bit of it was a democratic country from the 60s, and it was very prosperous in that regard. Like something was working, but at the same time things began to fail. Like especially after we nationalize oil, our state grows disproportionately, and we begin to invest and waste, or not waste, but definitely use too much, expect too much out of oil money. And
so there's sort of like so you mentioned this was in the 70s, so there's sort of like a expansion of the economy, but maybe to some extent a false sense of expansion, right?
Yes.
From the oil money that your country was.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the state starts growing disproportionately, the economy starts growing, but then once the crisis hits in the 80s, at that point, I don't know what happened in the world that triggered a drop in the oil price, but with it came the Venezuelan economy. And so now we're just without money, in severe crisis. In 1989, actually, we even tried to implement austerity measures to try to reduce the size of the state, make a public transport private, stop subsidizing gasoline, make the communications company private. And in the process, that actually started huge social unrest, especially in the capital. There was a special event called the Caracazo. Caracas is the capital of Venezuela. And in as I mentioned, 89, there was a social explosion, like a looting exploded in the capital, and the government responded with repression from the army. And official numbers are around 270, but later something called fosas comunes, like wells full of bodies of dead people, were found with up to 2,000 or 3,000 people.
So this was in 1989, so around when the Cold War ended, right? The Berlin Wall fell.
In those times,
yes. And this was a organic sort of social, the people rising up against the powerful or the government?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
it's not so much. It wasn't organized. It wasn't political.
Okay.
It was more looked like looting, like social chaos. It was more like social explosions where things got chaotic. Businesses, you could see people just going into the businesses and taking everything they could. There are videos where my parents lived through that, and they tell me it was a very shocking. It's just a very special image, very different. You can see people, I don't know, carrying from the butcher the pieces of meat or whatever, and everything is destroyed. Everything is on the kiosks are on the floor, or very dystopic in a way. But so things just exploded socially in that way, even though it was contained in the span of a few months. But that spoke to the degree of, let's say, social unrest that was present in the society. And inflation in those times reached 100%. At the peak, then it was 80, 60, but it was hovering in pretty high numbers. And so you had like economic, let's say, like a
decline.
Fallout, decline. Decline is a word.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you had like an erosion of the democratic institutions. Like people were slowly losing faith. and the power of the economic institutions to solve the issue. And of the, sorry, not the economic, but political and democratic institutions to solve the issue. And in comes Chavez. So Chavez comes and actually appears for the first time in 1992. So soon after the crisis of 89, for instance, soon after Caracaso. And he sees this unrest and he decides to, okay, let's do a coup and let's try to
remove the government.
And like reinstitutionalize the country, but he fails. And something very peculiar happened.
Sorry, was it in 92 that he tried the coup, or was it?
Yes, in 92 he tried the coup. Yeah.
Okay.
And something very peculiar happened where he owned up to the responsibility of his of the actions of the coup, and yes, somehow there was a message. He was, for some reason, the government of the time let him speak. The officials of the time let him speak in public TV and send a message to the rest of the military camps that had taken over in other parts of the country, and the message was to simply lay down in arms. But in the process, he owned up to the responsibility and said, "Hey, for now, our missions or objectives were not reached, and we will, so please lay down the arms, and we take responsibility for the failure of the situation." But that message resonated with people, like someone trying to fix it, while at the same time owning up to the failures of the...
I see. So it was simultaneously the recognition that Chavez had that said, okay, something about this situation is failing. Let's take it upon ourselves to attempt this coup, but also recognizing that it failed and owning up to that failure. And the people sort of saw that and were swayed by it and maybe put more faith in him for that. For owning up to it. Is that's what,
in a way,
the picture that I have in my head?
Absolutely. In a way, so the next president, Rafael Caldera, who won, I don't remember if it's 94, I think, he was one of the few politicians who did not denounce the coup. So he said, how can you demand people to denounce a coup while they're starving? Something like that. Some remark about trying to give some understanding, and he's the one who went on to be the president, just to communicate a bit what there was a sympathy with the coup. And later on we will speak of other coups, and I will be more condemning in nature. And I think also the Chavez coup must be condemned. It's definitely an affront to the democratic process. But there wasn't hatred at the heart of it. When one engages in such a violent action against a democracy, the chances of you being right, doing it morally righteously, are extremely slim.
For sure. But it seems like this. The fact that there was social turmoil at that time provided the fertile ground for public opinion to support such an action against their government.
Absolutely. And
so I agree with you about coups in general, right? It's very difficult, right? I'm for democracy, so.
Yeah. It's definitely complicated. And so moving on, maybe now to Chavez. So now after that catapults him to the presidency. He runs now in the election. He sees, hey, no, the way is via elections, not via coups. He comes, though, with a controversial proposal. He says, hey, let's rewrite the Constitution. In a way, restart the Republic. It's called the Fifth Republic, even because
there's four before
the previous
that.
one, had a constitution from the 40s, was the fourth. From the 60s was the Fourth Republic. So how does he do that? Yeah, he calls for a referendum to say, hey, does the people even want a new constitution? He wins with a landslide. 58% of the people say yes. Then he calls for an election for the congressmen that will be in the constitutionary parliament that will rewrite the Constitution. And he wins also by a landslide. Moreover, since his popular support was much more distributed throughout the country, reaching rural areas and such, he ends up having, I think 90% of the deputies, his party, of the congressmen. And so maybe here we begin to see some of maybe the first hints as to why he was a polarizing figure and why he eventually distilled a lot of hatred in a sector, or at least, at the very least, apprehension and concern in a sector of the population. Partly because he's restarting the republic. He has too much control over this process, maybe his party, and that definitely some people were concerned about that. The new constitution that came out was more. I've heard it say that it provided more powers to the president than previous ones. I don't know the details of that, but at the same time, over time, everybody owned the Constitution. Like at this point, nobody questions the Constitution as a reasonable framework for the country. Like it wasn't obviously, let's say, just filled with abuse so it's a healthy enough Constitution within the means of what a reasonable republican democracy should be.
I mean, you mentioned that you don't know the details, so maybe this question you might not know, but was it radically different to the Constitution that was part of the Fourth Republic, or do you know how different it was? No, okay.
No, I don't. Oddly
fine.
enough, I don't think it was, because I really think the problems of the country were more economic in nature, and those are my opinions about how we overuse the state when we have oil to try to solve problems, and then we end up indebted, and then we crash when the oil falls. And the Constitution was not really in any way related to that. But whatever, we use this tool to try to address it. But I agree, I don't know the relations or tensions between them.
Fair enough.
It's a good question. I should figure out what were the main differences.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that just to say that how, in what ways was he polarizing? And this is way number one, I think. And I'm speculating a bit. I know that these are things that happened. I don't know if these are the polarizing elements that led to the further events that I will tell you about in 2002. That's the speculative part.
Okay.
The second thing that I think was polarizing was he started to establish relationships with Cuba.
Okay.
And in Venezuela, we had a decent anti-communist propaganda from all 60s, 70s, 80s. The Communist Party was illegal for a while. And just to say, the moment that he does that, you have some parts of the country that immediately begin to fear, like, oh, whoa. We got the communist Chavez, I don't know, he's going to steal our property, he's going to eliminate, I don't know, he's going to turn us into this communist dictatorship. So the boogeyman of communism enters a bit into the picture there.
Was Chavez overly advert in his support for communism?
No.
Okay.
At this point, he's more like I think his reference was more like a third way Tony Blair kind of statements.
Okay.
I think he was less overtly radical, say, than a Bernie Sanders or a Mondami at this point.
Okay, interesting.
He's more
so kind of like sort of almost middle of the road,
in a
almost
way.
kind of center leftish.
Center leftist for sure, maybe more than center leftish, but and populistic in his speech. I would have to look in detail. For sure, the campaign was very much like this, but he was not a socialist by any chance. He was not. He was. Those words were not pronounced until 2005, and he wasn't a radical by any stretch. Okay. Even though we will later on definitely become that.
Sure.
But yeah, and so I think, why do I mention that? Because I just wanted to emphasize that, okay, this is a bit of a preamble, both of the country and now of Chavez itself, a preamble for what happened in 2002. And I think, in my mind, I think symbolically, 2002 really marks a phase transition in our physics parlance. It's really a change into something somewhat different, at least in the collective imagination. Not exactly. It's just... So what happened was a military coup. April 11th, 2002, we had the first attempt to overthrow the government. It was a military coup. Several facts made it happen, but essentially it was the private interests of the country, the corporate sector, tried to overthrow him. In fact, one leader of the corporate sector was the one who took the leadership and as the wannabe dictator in the moment. He lasted only for 3 days, so succeeded for a second and then immediately failed, luckily enough. And why do I mention that? Because I think it speaks, one, to the polarization of the country had back then. It speaks, two, to how this polarization very quickly led, and I don't want to overly accuse the opposition, but it definitely led them to commit extremely severe crimes against democracy itself. In the very early stages, where no major crime had been committed by Chavez or the Chavez movement back then, and it speaks to some important degeneration of the process and how there was enough hate that, to some degree, because we will later see that also the Chavez movement will degenerate itself, and so it's easy to think we will deeply go into the midst of war soon enough, and I think in the middle of war it's easy to justify hate. Hate is natural.
Of course.
But it's interesting to see that there's a direct causal line connecting the hate that we will see later on to the hate that was already in 2002 when no major problems were happening. In fact, the economy was already improving. Oil prices had increased. So just to say, and we will see that, maybe I can emphasize now that I fundamentally believe that the problem of Venezuela is not one of the rise of authoritarianism and a dictatorship, but rather one of a country progressively falling into war with itself. I think that's fundamentally in the narrative, and this is one of the foundational moments where that war is declared, the 2002 coup. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just ask you before you continue.
Yeah.
What does that look like on just a regular societal level? So are you saying that there are, so take the 2002 example that you just mentioned, right? There was a attempted coup of the government, of the Chavez government.
Against the Chavez government?
Against the Chavez government by people who were well off, maybe?
The military, the private media, which was essentially all of media.
Sure.
Company sectors,
So are they, and so those types of people that tried this coup, are they simultaneously, they must be, trying to sell a particular narrative to the people, saying Chavez is against you, he's an authoritarian, this sort of thing, to garner up that motivation to take him out, Chavez.
Yeah.
When you say that, the problem with Venezuela is that it keeps, fighting itself, right? Is there a causal link there must be between people that rise up like this and convince the population that the other side is horrible and needs to be removed? Is that the type of thing that you're talking about in terms of Venezuela fighting itself?
I mean, absolutely,
right?
Yeah. And I mean, back then, what led to the coup was, again, the fear of communism. That was very strong, strongly present, I think, in the speeches of I think so. I seem to remember. It's hard to say. And I also remember, so the justification of the coup was, snipers were put in place in the neighboring areas of where the opposition march of April 11th. The opposition was led to be nearby the pro-Chavez rally. And amidst this confluence, snipers were put in place and shot at the marching people. And those dead people that arose were used to say, oh, Chavez called the army against the people, and now the military have to rise. So it's a confluence of on one you have some sentiment that was already pushed by media that Chavez is a communist. You have a specific plot involving killing.
These are civilians that were taking place.
Yeah, exactly. Those civilians. Then you have the media really pushing forward this narrative, and in fact, you had one, I remember, pro-Chavez, I think he was a military, I forget his name, Rondon, it starts with an R. I wouldn't be able to say, but I remember he acts, in the middle of the coup, he acts as if, oh, I'm going to make an announcement about Chavez's renouncing of power. It was stated that he had stepped down, and he had signed stepping down, a document stepping down, and he tells this to the media, and ultimately, when he shows up and when he's interviewed, he says, Chavez has been kidnapped and he has not stepped down as president. And immediately after that, like the private media shut him down. But still, word had already gotten out to the people, and slowly the people started to gather around the presidential palace. And just to say, there's definitely cooperation between different sectors of society, and there was a preparation to it that distilled some hate in some people tragically. And while at the same time, Chavez made controversial enough moves to trigger partly this contempt and made some economic policies that, for instance, he was I don't know, nationalizing land that was not being used to give to farmers, and that was controversial and conflicted, clashed with private interests.
Sure.
And so you have too many variables conspiring
Sure.
to lead to this.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a bit of a picture of what happened then. Immediately after Chavez calls for national reconciliation, and in 2002 a second coup attempt happens, this time via an oil strike. The oil company, which essentially is, I don't know, an unnecessarily big fraction of the GDP, they decide to go on strike and paralyze the national oil company to demand the stepping down of Chavez. Chavez definitely just refuses to do so.
Mm-hmm.
After a month, they have to comply with Chavez. That leads also to a changing in the leadership in the oil company. A lot of people are removed. Maybe I mentioned this one to say this was 2 attempts in a row. So, and where there was an attempt for national reconciliation, just to say, now, even if Chavismo was already somewhat of a populist, there was a populist rhetoric and a populist sentiment within the movement. Now they're going to triple down. Now there is now class struggle is going to be at the forefront of the speech, and you have on the one side, you have the people, you have the workers, you have
The proletariat.
the proletariat, in a way, yes, and then you have the fascists, you have the bourgeoisie, the parasitic bourgeoisie, we would call it, the oligarchy.
And so he's framing it as Chavez and his people are the bourgeois. And,
No, he's the
so
he's the
is
proletariat.
Chavez giving these speeches to the people and saying, I'm with people, I'm with the proletariat?
Yeah.
I see, okay.
Just to say, and now it was
Okay,
definitely of
okay.
the poor, the working class against the rich. And now, definitely now, sentiments are heating up. Also on the Chavismo side, they were already populist, but not, radical to the same degree. And now things are heating up. And further things happen. In 2004, you see, the new constitution foresaw the possibility of a recall referendum, meaning that halfway through an elected official's term, you can call, hey, let's call for an election to see if we want to depose this person. And the opposition calls this for Chavez, and they do this in 2004, and they lose 60-40. Election that was recognized by the OAS, the Carter Institute or Foundation, the Carter Center, Carter Center, led by Jimmy Carter, U.S. ex-president or president, it was recognized by the United States. So we have an election that was, by all international standards, pretty rigorous. Yet the opposition in the moment, based essentially on exit polls as the main piece of evidence, with some extra ones, which we could eventually go into, but they argued that there was fraud and that they had won 60-40 to depose Chavez.
Okay.
But so from then what happened was they were able to distill this distrust. So it's tragic. It's really like a second massive attack to the foundational structures of a democracy.
Yeah.
And it reminds me very much when Trump tried to do a similar thing in the days and months preceding January 6th. You can see that it's a very similar sentiment. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that there were no irregularities. Because I think in any democratic election, you may still find irregularities. The statement is, do those irregularities live up to the standard to declare the election fraudulent? And I think, especially with regards to, if you're going to make a complaint or an accusation with regards to the election, you do have to do it with extreme care. Because you're about to, you see...
And just to interject, you also have to have in place the proper checks and balances in order, if you want to make such a claim, then you have to take it to something like the Supreme Court or the courts, and they have to be as impartial as they can.
Well,
And this is the foundation of in my opinion, a well-functioning democracy, right? Having those checks and balances on the power of the government.
I agree, and maybe what I would say is sometimes even those institutions in a democratic process will not live up to the standard that you wish.
Sure.
And you will have fears, like, damn, is this rigorous enough? Is this, and even in those circumstances, I think I want to push it even to the edge of how controversial it can get. Like, even in those circumstances, you have to be extremely careful, I think, because you see, democracy to me is the solution to the problem of problems, in the sense of, you have problems, and well, you and I may have a disagreement, and since we're only two, maybe we can enter into dialect and find a joint solution.
Sure.
But for Venezuela, it's a 30 million people country. Like, you can't make 30 million people agree.
Exactly.
So democracy tells you, hey,
exactly.
You
have to have a system in place, so that to the best possible extent, everybody in your society feels like the society is working.
Well, I would even say that, to me, it's about, let's take turns in how we approach certain problems and what problems we address. That's what democracy does. Since consensus is almost impossible to arise with these issues, sometimes you will do your thing, sometimes I will do my thing, and we will let majority rule be the determining factor. And, well, it's not perfect, but like Churchill said, like, what is it? Democracy is the worst system except for all the rest, or something.
Sure.
But just to say, it's really about it's how to solve the problem of problems. And if you attack too aggressively, the mechanism that solves the problem of how to address problems, that you run a extremely severe risk of destabilizing your entire society. Because now, okay, well, how do we do it then? If it's not by elections, okay, now what? You're destroying the game that allows us to. I'm willing to let you work as long as you give me a chance in 4 years or 6 years to now do my thing. If you don't, like, now we have to fight.
Right, and then you're in the realm of autocracy and authoritarianism, and we know all about that from throughout human history, right?
Yeah. And who knows what happens? But it's very destabilizing. And so, in any case, I think they definitely attacked this in a reckless way for an election that was absolutely certified by extremely high standards of rigor. And and by the way, that's the same electoral system we have right now. So
sorry, this was, what year was the election?
2004.
2004.
The recall referendum.
Okay.
Just to say, definitely the political situation in Venezuela has degenerated severely, or it's actually improved, but degenerated. We'll maybe talk about it, hopefully. But on the technical side, definitely our electoral system is really, really robust. And maybe the politicians themselves have, and the state has gotten corrupted enough that they can try to manipulate it somehow, but the technical aspects were so robust. I doubt that can be actually falsified, because it's got so many layers of, and we can talk about that.
Is it just maybe, so I have a model in my mind, is it sort of like, the U.S. system where you elect
in some ways,
representatives to represent your communities?
No, I think it's even better in a way. No, let's say even a direct election for the president, it's just 1-to-1. And then you say
and
the point
majority
is
wins.
Majority wins.
Okay.
But I mean, the system is, in the months prior, you have audits about who is allowed to vote. Those are called electoral lists, or whatever. They have a name. And then you have audits about the machines themselves. And then you have, and in theory, all the participating parties should have people who are witnessing the different audits. This is preceding the election. Of course, some of these will fail, and it happens.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
How is it determined? You mentioned there's an audit determining who can vote. Do you know?
Oh, I just mean you have to
that,
sign up.
you just have to sign up. Like me, if I was a Venezuelan citizen, I just have to sign up.
Yeah. If you're old beyond 18 years old, you can
beyond
just
18. Sure,
and the point is,
sure.
if someone dies, you have to clean up the lists. It's all
Sure,
about that. It's mostly about that. Auditing that people are not voting.
Sure.
It's mostly about that.
Okay.
And then you have the day of the election. You have several layers again of scrutiny. You have that all parties can and big parties have witnesses in every electoral center, and they witness who the people going in to the electoral machine. The machine prints a physical copy, like you put your vote, and by the way, you leave a fingerprint before you go in to certify that your identity, that you're an actual citizen of the republic. That machine prints up a physical tally that you put in a box, and then the machine eventually releases the results by the end of the day once the election is closed. Before doing so, the machine prints copies of the results for the witnesses. Copies are given to the witnesses from the different parties in the voting center, and then once you can compare what you have on the tally with the electoral result emanated from the actual electoral college, say, of the Venezuela, the National Electoral Center. And moreover, what? You can actually, back then it was like 10% of the physical copies are counted live in the spot. Oh. So that you can compare that the percentage is right. I think right now it's 50% of the physical copies of the votes themselves that the voter himself
puts it into like a box.
Yeah, that nobody else checks, but they can just see that whatever the machine sees, they can fold and then put into the thing, just to make sure that extra layer of redundancy is there. And that is counted, 50% of those are counted by the end of the day. And we will eventually get to the 2024 election, but if all of those redundancies were in place, it's hard to see how a fraud could have been committed. But we will get to there because the opposition claims there was fraud then. But again, they have claimed fraud before in a way that was unfair, and so it's complicated. But now, I suppose, now we get second Chavez's term. He wins in 2006.
Okay.
So from 2004, we go to 2006. He's becoming more and more radicalized, or more of a populist, more of a socialist. And I was going to say something else, but you had a question?
So I just say, So 2004 was a national election?
It was the recall referendum.
The recall referendum.
This thing that you can call halfway through an elected official's term.
Okay, I see. So it's kind of like I'm a little less familiar now in the U.S. It's like the midterms.
But it's it's optional, and you can call it for any elected official just to depose them.
I see. Okay. So that's 2004.
Yeah.
And then there's another official election,
presidential
election in 2006.
Yeah.
To which
Chavez wins 62% of the vote, absolute majority.
Okay.
Everybody accepts this one, opposition as well.
Okay.
Maybe I forgot to mention that in 2005, the opposition tried to, boycott the Congress, the election for Congress, for the parliament.
Okay.
They don't participate. And in the process, again, the distilling further distrust, but that's not even the bigger problem. The problem is now Chavez and his party have full control of parliament because the opposition did not participate.
Yeah.
And then they have, the parliament has the control to decide the Supreme Court and to choose the people in charge of the other powers of the country. We have 5 powers, 5 branches of power.
Okay.
And most countries is executive, judicial, and parliament.
Yeah.
We have also electoral and something called I forget. So, and I think you have district attorneys and you have something more in charge of defending the people against the state, I think. Yeah. And I don't know if it's called the Poder Popular. Who cares? The point is, the parliament has the capacity to control most of them except the executive and I don't know what else. And the point is, so once you have that, the government, definitely, the Chavez party, now begins to, we're in a mood where we don't trust the opposition. We have already fired plenty of people from the government just because we don't perceive them to be allied with us politically. Now this is becoming, we have to state very tightly, we need to care for loyalty. And in the process, we will begin to see the loss of independence between political powers. Like now the justice system and electoral system.
They're all kind of coalescing around
Chavez.
That sphere of ideas and...
Yes. Okay. So just to say, that is something that did happen. Like Chavez accumulated power, but it was not something that happened in the vacuum. It's something that It's happening in an environment where they perceive the opposition wants to overthrow us. The United States has some signs of having been involved in the 2002 coup. So, and in that process, in that climate of polarization, and again, we begin to, in a way, be already at war. Like you can be the tensions, the internal tensions in the country are degrading the democratic institutions.
Okay.
And so it's that sort of social process that really damaged my country.
Yeah.
So that's 2006. What will follow will actually be some decently good years. Already oil prices went up, as I mentioned at the beginning of Chavez. He invested heavily on social programs, and the economy was doing well. The 2002 oil strike, definitely damaged the economy. Also the 2008 crisis. But other than that, the economy was doing well. Okay, inflation was between 20 and 30%. That wasn't great. But overall, the economy was doing good. And the poverty was getting reduced. People were raising their quality of life, for sure. And, now that Chavez, it's a bit of a tragedy. They associated the fact that they perceived an enemy in the U.S. and in the private sector meant that they were overly they were overly socialistic in a way, overly left-leaning in a way that was counterproductive. They started nationalizing enormous, like they went on this spree, just nationalizing one company after the other, especially in his second term in 2007, starting, and that will have huge repercussions later.
So you're saying kind of sort of over time, Chavez was getting more and more, leaning more and more left.
Yeah.
More and more adopting socialist policies, nationalizing certain sectors of the economy.
Yeah.
In part because he was seeing opposition from places like U.S., opposition from his own opposition parties, that sort of thing.
And what he thought was that like the private sectors, the oligarchies,
sure.
opposition from that. So hey, if you want to cooperate with us to, I don't know, subsidize this piece of food, then or to lower the price of this piece of food to control inflation, like now you're ours. And now the yogurt company is state owned, the corn flour company is state owned. You had this huge increase on what the government was trying to do, and most of these companies just failed, and so now the government was leaking money to keep them afloat, and so now the government is reaching like gargantuan proportions, and we are essentially pretty much planning our economy on $100 oil. And not really, like we were planning it at 50, but then we had something called additional credits, so that whenever something went off budget, you can just call for an additional credit. In the parliament, it's like, have this extra money.
I see.
So we would budget it for $50 a barrel, but still we would spend way above that. And we got hugely indebted, especially with China. We're still paying that debt to this day.
So like printing, is it a level of like printing money, artificially bloating the economy by
Not
just
yet.
putting... Okay.
So the printing money will come, but now we still have dollars. We still have the oil to compensate for the fact that we're spending like mad.
Yeah.
But now the next thing will happen, which is, so two things happen. One, Chavez dies, and this is in 2012. So his second presidency ends. He wins the election to start a third, but he dies a few months later.
Okay.
And his successor, Nicolás Maduro, takes over. He wins by a very short margin in 2013. Like it must have been like 1% margin. So he really just, Chavez won by 10%. So he just really, lost a lot of political capital. The opposition had distrust on the election, even though to this day, I haven't seen any strong evidence or any real evidence whatsoever that there was any
Was it at the
serious
same
case of
level
fraud.
as in 2004 when they were...
In a way, but no. Like the opposition leader back then was able to at some point say, hey, we will accept it.
Okay.
But there was a whole process. At some point he was questioning it. The electoral center decided to, well, let's count 100% of the tallies or of the boxes, because that was the original request. Once that was approved, or maybe even the original request immediately evolved into actually, no, we have to not only do that, but open all the books of the voters and see who's dead and alive. And requests were happening very fast. The government decided, well, let's grant this one. And then they decided, you know what, nothing is going to satiate these people.
Yeah.
Let's just call it. And I haven't seen evidence that there was fraud in that election. But to this day, the opposition feels like that one was also fraudulent. And, well, it's one of these places where the world is essentially bifurcated in my country. And moreover, now Maduro is not close to being the political figure that Chavez was. Like, Chavez was a behemoth, like just the charisma. He became a bit of a deity almost, a father figure for the entire movement. And with his passing, he's, almost raised, as I say, to the level of deity. It's unhealthy in a way. But now Maduro can't for sure live up to his shoes, and that will destabilize the country a bit. Or at the very least, it will open him up for what will later be some political attacks to try to overthrow him. While at the same time, and maybe it can make some regards, there is both the political dimension and the economic dimension. If I say some things about the economic dimension, first is, as Maduro takes over, the main thing that happens really is that fracking comes into the picture, and oil prices just collapse. From $80 or $100 a barrel, we go to like $30 a barrel. And at this price, we're just not making enough money to pay for all the expenses that we have acquired. And now the government is saying, now the government is printing wildly.
They're trying to keep up with this.
Yeah. And amidst, of course, also then economic sabotage, later on would be explicit economic sanctions.
Yeah.
So now we have the perfect spiral where internal opposition and the U.S. is both sabotaging the economy internally, and now afterwards with sanctions, the government has completely exceeded what their budget is capable of handling.
Yeah.
And now they're printing like mad. And inflation went from Chavez 2012 was 20%. 2013 closes in like 60 or 70%, I think 69.
Wow.
Then 2014 closes in 430%, and later it's going to be 100,000, a million percent. Like it's, as I was there, I would see a price would double every other week. Like was it while I was, and because I lived
grocery stores.
Yeah.
Gas,
bread.
Yeah.
Gas was subsidized, so that one stayed more or less stable.
Okay.
But
and so just to understand, this came from a mix of the adoption of fracking, U.S. sanctions.
Sanctions would come in later, like 2016. I think, 2017,
Okay.
with the Trump administration.
Okay. But this inflation of 400% was a result of.
I think it's both. It's both some internal economic sabotage, but mostly
from opposition leaders.
Well, it comes in the form. It's complicated. It comes in the form. For instance, one way you can do it is the currency was controlled. That's a stupid economic policy the government had.
Yeah.
So the price of the currency. So to buy dollars, you would do it through the state, but then they would sell it extremely cheap. So it was to buy through the government was extremely hard because everybody wanted it.
Yeah.
So you had a private market, and now you have some external people setting the price of the black market price, and you can tweak that to kick price increases. But while that is happening, then the government increases. Oh, now we increase minimum wages to compensate for this, but now that's only increasing the inflation spiral. So you had these very perverse dynamics, and I definitely like economic sabotage internally was a part, but I don't want to, let's say, understate.
Sure, it's just one component of
definitely
a broader reasoning why this.
Yeah, and economic mismanagement may have been the main variable, like the fact that the government was spending way more than it had.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can have inflation without overly spending. Like, I think that you can make it worse. Like, you can have overly spending and then someone sabotaging you and make situations worse.
Sure.
But
overly spending is in itself going to cause some amount of inflation.
Yeah, and essentially it's just the printing, essentially.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that caused a spectacular, when I mean spectacular, like mind-bogglingly bad economic collapse. Like, I would do 3-hour lines for chicken, an hour line every day for bread. I would bring my grandmother for the chicken line. Okay, Mom, Grandma, so we can get two. It was, and I lost 5 kilos, and I'm this freaking, middle class bourgeoisie, like privileged kid.
Sure.
The term, the Maduro diet became a bit of a thing. Everybody was just, it was a dark time, man. Like, I cannot overstate how, how spectacular the collapse was up until 2018, say.
2018.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, because you had not only you had hyperinflation, but you have price controls, which means what's the word? It means you have when goods are not in the economy anymore, shortages, and it was just horrible. And people buying cheap subsidized goods to sell them in the black market. Then, so it was just
Wow.
horrible. Okay, so that's what was happening economically. All the while, you had now in 2014. You had the rise. Okay, you had the first attempt again to overthrow the government. Mind you, after all the way from 2006 to 2013, the opposition had really built a political coalition. They had decided to remain strictly within elections, and like there were no coups, maybe some sabotaging of the economy here and there, but it's less overt, and for the most part, they were really aligned with, okay, the way to do it is through elections.
Yeah.
And they had built a solid political movement, like, because they have too many parties inside it. And somehow they were able to build an umbrella that would join them. And that is completely gone nowadays. But between that period, up until 2016, which we'll get to, that was a joint force, maybe 2017. And then, okay, so what happens in 2014? You begin to have, again, efforts to overthrow the government outside of the democratic means. I remember I was in university back then in my undergrad, second semester, and the students call a march. I think it's the day, for sure it's the day of the youth. I think it's February 12th, but I'm not sure. It might be February 20th. So they call this march, and very suspiciously, even though the march was happening in an extremely peaceful manner, one of the guys, I think it was Basil da Costa, like happened to, I don't know why, there is a video of his murder. He finds himself in an alley and some policeman is behind him, somehow chases him, and at some point just shoots him down.
Okay.
Extremely suspicious circumstances. The government apprehended eventually the person who shot the guy.
Yeah.
But that sparked a sequence of protests, a month, I think, or several weeks for sure, worth of protests. And what happened was the opposition essentially, they took their political strongholds, the quarters where they lived. They were essentially fully barricaded. It was extremely hard to move by car because there would be like trashes and like debris just put together on walls. It was like a dystopic picture. It was bizarre.
Wow.
Like it was extremely hard to move through the city, especially through the opposition-controlled regions.
Yeah.
Even though that was essentially doing nothing in the government-controlled parts of the city, and the presidential palace is in a government-controlled part. Like there's a lot of government support there, and so it was, first of all, just fascinating as a social event to be a part of, and somewhat terrifying.
Yeah.
And so that is happening to try to. It was called the exit, la salida. The movement was very explicitly aimed at overthrowing the government. There was no military coup, no economic pressure, but it was just social unrest trying to trigger some military response.
It was triggered by this killing of
Basil da Costa, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But at the same time, one could speculate, and some conspiracy theorists, if I put my conspiracy theorist hat,
Sure.
which I don't think is that unreasonable, like that people, the killing of someone was planned so as to trigger these events.
Okay, I mean...
But whatever. You never
Yeah,
know.
sure.
That's me.
Yeah.
Because that lasted, well, yeah, whatever. And now that failed, but over 40 people were killed, died, and those, and maybe I should also, so when you hear those numbers, they make it seem like it's the government who killed them, but like around half or more, like I think I did the math a year ago, and it was about 25 or 26, I think, that were killed in part or were responsibility of the opposition. For instance, someone who would be driving and not see the barricade come up in the middle of the night and crash and die. Sometimes it wasn't a barricade, but a wire that was put and at neck level, and someone who would just die in a motorcycle. Or someone who wanted medical attention and the ambulance just couldn't come because of the barricades.
Yeah.
Or someone who was like burnt alive via a Molotov cocktail, because there were some of those. Like my father, one day he was trying to remove the debris to pass with his car, and he was thrown, him and my uncle, they were thrown a Molotov cocktail from the apartments nearby. No, yeah, it was a terrifying period. And at the same time, so just to say, again, I really think the correct framing is a time of war. Because then you will also see a rise of authoritarianism on the side of the state. There were cases of torture that are being denounced. And I don't know if the government is actively behind those, or at the very least making a blind eye to the situation. But cases of torture begin to arise. There are denouncing situations with something called colectivos. So I'm pretty sure the government has, in a way, militias or people they have armed in the case of, hey, if they manage to take us down, we need people who are also armed so as to put up a good resistance. And some of those are colectivos, some are milicias bolivarianas, I think is called, the Bolivarian militias. But I'm not super sure, like we would have to check some of the names and some of the specific organizations. Also, colectivos are actually people who are just some social organization systems to address problems in society. So it's not all with this purpose. Yeah. But some of them are, and if they're involved, and they will be eventually, some of them are involved in the containment of these protests. They will use violence in a way that's untrained, and they will end up killing opposition protesters. So you have this, well, you have a war again, essentially. And in the midst of that, you have a lot of dead people and just a very tragic overall situation. And again, so that's what happened in 2014. So we've already covered a lot, but and I suppose there is more, and I'm about to enter what is maybe the darkest period politically, of the darkest action of the government. And I can tell you about it, but I don't know if you have any questions or any remarks about it.
No, I'm trying to process all of this information that you're telling me, and I'm not super well educated on this your country and state of affairs leading up to today. So I'm just trying to absorb what you're telling me. Yeah.
And you feel something. Yeah.
It sounds like, to me, it sounds like the leaders of your country, the two sides of your country, the two, let's say, for lack of a better word, political parties. One of them is the Maduro at this point faction, and the other one is the opposition. It sounds in many ways very similar to what I think we're increasingly seeing in the United States, increasingly seeing to some extent here in Canada, where it's really these two factions that are fighting each other, but they're using the people. They're trying to polarize the people themselves, and that's sort of leading to social unrest between the different factions of the people that are following either this side or this side. Among these economic things and potential government-backed assassinations or something. So that's kind of the picture that I have in my mind from what you're describing. I don't know if that is like it just seems to me whenever there's a economic unrest, right? People lining up, as you described, for 3 hours to get bread or something like that. I think there's naturally going to be support for people in power that want to take power, right?
What do you mean?
Like we're seeing, for example, in the United States, right? We're seeing large economic sort of crises in the United States, and there are charismatic people such as Donald Trump, for example, who know that the people are against, to some extent, the politicians, and they know that the politicians are working for, the rich donors and stuff, and he's using that to garner support for himself and to garner political power for himself. So
And maybe I would make some contrasts here, and then we can draw the parallels. Because maybe Chavez did a little bit of that. Definitely, he was a figure that aimed at, hey, we're going to solve the problems, and we have to restart from scratch in a way. That's why we need the Constitution, and we have to really reinvigorate society somehow. But he was much more moral of a figure than Trump.
Sure.
And I know you weren't putting it like that. I know. But and maybe and another distinction I wanted to say was, because you mentioned, yes, amidst, let's say, economic pain, it's easy to try to find a populist or someone to try to solve the issue. But I don't think that was happening during the protests, even though partly it was. Definitely the worsening of the situation is making opposition leaders and opposition people feel like, okay, we have to do something about it because this is collapsing. But I don't think that was the main driver. And the reason for that is most poor people were not partaking in this. So the main people afflicted by this, they would still either support the government or not participate in these protests. Just to say there's a clear social, like a class divide around this issue. And that's why I mentioned a bit the hatred associated with the 2002 coup. Like that sentiment has been continually there in the opposition all throughout. And and it's not necessarily doesn't arise from economic hardship. It arises from somewhere else. Even though economic hardship, of course, makes it worse and gives it credence and validity. It reaffirms it. So that pain does play a role, but it's slightly different. And the way in which it's similar, like you said, is definitely well, I don't know how much to overstep. I don't know enough about Canada, even about the U.S. There's definitely polarization. It seems to be getting more. But the institutions seem to be much more robust. Luckily enough, like I mentioned, the January 6th, all institutions jumped to protect the electoral system, essentially. Even Fox News was like, whoa, buddy, you're out of line here. We're not gonna. You did lose the election, though. And except for like Newsmax or something, like essentially everybody was like, okay, like he says this thing, but which is very interesting to see that there is and I think that happens with wiser, more robust, more stable democracies. They know they will push it, but somehow they manage to like, whoa, there's a line we don't want to cross. All the protests in the U.S. Maybe except for January 6th, which is more borderline, but still. They were not to overthrow the government or a democratic institution or to do something that is that reprehensible in that way. They were social unrests. They were situations of some degree of protest. And with a specific goal in mind, usually to change the either ICE situation or maybe the George Floyd to change some. That one actually probably escalated. I don't know. I don't want to overstate, but escalated into social unrest in a more severe way. But it had the idea of, hey, how do we get, the dynamic between police and black communities under control. And so it's not about, okay, well, now we have to just remove the government. It doesn't escalate all the way to that. For some reason, these societies, maybe yours included, I don't know enough about Canada, maybe you can tell me, they seem to be more grounded in that sense. They have a greater respect for the democratic institutions.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that in recent years, particularly starting with the January 6th stuff, that element of our society is deteriorating, in my view. Right, where you're seeing more and more political violence, you're seeing more and more assassination attempts against politicians, or successful assassinations against political figures or politicians themselves, particularly in the United States, right? And that is something that I haven't seen growing up here in North America in my entire life, up until the last 5 years, right?
That's true, I had forgotten about those,
And it just, of course, it's not an exact parallel between what's going on here and what's been going on in your country
it's
for the last
for sure.
20 years. But I can see elements of what you're saying about your country in starting to pop up here, right? And it's just, at least personally, it's worrisome for me.
I was going to say, hopefully it serves as somewhat of a cautionary tale.
So that all this is to say, I'm trying to build a mental picture of all of what you're telling me. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to have to go back home and read up and learn more myself because I'm really interested. And so maybe I'm mapping too much of what I know in our Canada and U.S. Society
Landscape.
onto what you're saying, but I could still see some connections.
No, they definitely are there.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's driving the society, the polarization in your societies, but But in Venezuela, it's also hard to say. I don't know. There was no social media back then, so you can't put it on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some U.S. contribution, some private enterprise contribution. The government also at some point also begins to polarize heavily and can gain more presence in social commentary, TV. But yeah, for some reason I agree. There are parallels there, and make that what you will. It's watch out. It's a cautionary tale. How do you destroy democracy? These are the steps.
Exactly.
In our case.
So okay. So you finished off what in around 2018?
I'll tell you 2014.
2014.
Those were the protests. One sequence.
Okay.
So I'm about to tell you what was to me the darkest period for the government, when it degenerated the most. So what happened was in 2015, the opposition finally wins an election by a landslide. 58% of the people, and this was the parliamentary election, and they win 2/3 of the parliament, which grants them absolute control to do whatever they want with laws, or the most power you can have within our system. And immediately what happens is there are these tricks from the government. So what happened was the National Electoral Council decides, or declares, hey, there was irregularities with 3 of the congressmen. I don't remember if it was 2. It was 2 and 1, but I think it was 2 pro-government and 1 opposition. But yet, by not allowing those to be sworn in, the opposition loses the 2/3 majority. Without the 2/3 majority, now, they don't have the same power to promote laws, to pass laws, and so the opposition says, "Hey, we will swear in these people anyways." But immediately, then the Supreme Court says, "Hey, now you are in defiance of the law, so we will nullify the Congress and nullify all your decisions henceforth." And so, essentially, the people were denied their, rightfully elected Congress, and I suppose that's the first of what will come to be some major crimes against democracy committed in the years to come, in between 2016 and 2018, essentially. So the election happens in 2015. In 2016 is where all these maneuvers happened to essentially eliminate Congress.
Can I just ask how are the Supreme Court justices appointed in your country? Do you know?
The Congress selects them.
The Congress
Parliament. I don't know what the period is. If it's 5,
so
6, 10 years.
Are people chosen by the government, by the president, and then they have to be confirmed, like in the United States?
I think the Parliament proposes them, and you need I think it may be a 2/3 majority to approve them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But they were probably elected during a period where the president, the Chavista party had a majority. I don't remember. I don't know why.
Okay.
Maybe you just need a majority, not a 2/3 majority to elect them. I don't remember. But they were clearly pro-government.
Sure.
Or definitely making calls very favorable to the government, to the point where they completely eliminated an opposition-dominated Congress.
Well, that's what I was gonna. Yeah, that's sort of again where my mind was going. Is that whoever's appointing these Supreme Court justices must have been doing so in at least the hope that, in some sense, they would back the government themselves, right? Rather than adhering strictly to the letter of the law, right?
And that was, as I mentioned, the government at some point was looking very much for loyalty and cohesion, and we will not allow for the deviations, because then we get overthrown, and in the process we just essentially undermined democratic independence of powers, the separation of powers.
Okay.
And so that's one of the stabbings that happens to the democracy in the moment. later on, in 2016, we're precisely halfway through the Maduro presidential term, which means we can call a recall referendum again.
Okay.
The opposition gathers the signatures. You need, I don't know if it's 10 or 15% of the country, but the National Council, Electoral Council says, hey, actually there are issues with the signatures. You need to get them again. But now so much time has passed. This is April 2016. That we actually have to do it in 2017, the elections anyways. And that's a problem because, you see, if you call the referendum before the first half finishes, you have to call it in the year that's at the half. But if you do it before the exact half, then if the recall wins, the president gets deposed and a new election is called. Otherwise, if the recall referendum is called in 2017, the vice president takes over. That's beyond...
I see. So the regime is still in power, but it's just now the vice president.
Exactly. So they managed to do this maneuver, and now, we can't do anything, really. Oh, no. And now, essentially, the recall referendum is annulled.
Okay.
So now we have Congress annulled, recall referendum annulled. Governor elections are supposed to be called in December 2016, and they just aren't. No one says anything. There's no public official simply declared, oh, why are they not happening?
Yeah.
They just didn't happen. Because the government was going to lose them. So calling elections in a very politically, let's say, disfavorable moment for the government was not convenient. And the government had just lost the last one by a landslide. The next thing that happens is further protests explode, this time with the Supreme Court decision to say, hey, they decided for a second to take on the duties of the Congress and say, we can pass laws now. That lasts for 3 days, maybe a week, I don't know. But there's immediate response, both in protests and within the government. And so that gets immediately aborted, but the protests remain. And now we enter into the 2017 protests, which were also very convulsive. A lot of barricades throughout, again, the opposition strongholds. I remember myself just biking through highways that were completely empty because the barricades, they will let you go through. And it's very interesting. There is a very contradictory element to the barricades because people within them, they were in the middle of their community. They were playing domino. They were the kids playing soccer, and you would pass by on your bike, and they would help you sometimes pass it over the thing. But of course, the sentiment was very antagonistic against the government, and there's we gotta remove the dictatorship. Once the protests, the protests are on and off while the barricades are always on, and you have these alternations of sentiment. It was very just a contradictory thing, and you would ride what is it, a 8-lane highway, and I'm in the stupid bike, what a privilege. The best bike lane in there. It's beautiful. It's whoa, because there were no cars. But so it's very interesting that's happening. The country is exploding, or not the country, but especially the capital and other sectors, but and over 100 people died this time.
Wow.
There is it's harder to tell, probably a lot.
Can I just say at this moment, what's the? Are we still in economic turmoil?
Oh, absolutely. We're in the middle of
3-hour, 4-hour lines for groceries.
1,000,000% inflation. 2017 is probably the worst year. 2016, 2017 are the worst years.
Okay.
Absolute hell.
Okay.
I got lucky enough that my parents had some dollars saved, and there was essentially dollars were completely overpriced in the black market. So if you had dollars, you can just sell them in the black market and be rich.
Yeah.
And we realized, oh shoot, let's just sell the savings, which is not something you would ever do.
Sure.
Because you feel oh man, savings are to be protected. But once we realized that, and we could live comfortably with, and that then we were much more comfortable. But before that, I think I already said I lost 5 kilos just out of the poor eating habits we had, and we would eat very specific recipes that simplistic and minimalistic.
Yeah.
Lentejas and yuca. Yuca, I don't know how you say yuca in English. Is it's like a potato but bigger. People who know from Venezuela will know.
I think I've seen it before. Yeah.
But so the protests explode, and amidst the protests, now the protests, in a way, it's not said explicitly, but the sentiment clearly is to overthrow the government. The policy of the Supreme Court has been taken back, and now the government, to counter the protests, commits yet what I think is maybe the biggest crime that they have committed, and one of the bigger, compared to the coup, is it's up there in one of the biggest crimes against our democracy for sure. They call for another constitutionary parliament, like a new rewriting of the Constitution.
Okay.
They eventually don't rewrite it, but they call for this parliament who would. And they don't ask a referendum if the people want it. They call only for the election to name the congressman who will rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
The opposition doesn't participate, of course, because they're in the middle of the protest. They don't trust the institutions. The goal of the protests becomes to stop this election. And yeah. So the election goes through, and this thing is elected, and this thing has control over all the branches of government. And also back then, but back then at least it had much more support, and the intent was less to simply stabilize and control all of the branches of the state. Here it was, okay, now we have control over the law, the Congress, the parliamentary branch. We have the control over essentially all of the government, and yeah, they just did that. And they had the power to rewrite the Constitution, even though eventually they didn't. So this was one of the darkest chapters, say. And after that happens, the protests immediately collapse and just not knowing what to do. Governor elections all of a sudden are called within a month. It's okay, next month are governor elections, the ones that didn't appear some months ago. Then you had some other regional elections, who cares? Presidential elections that are supposed to happen in 2018, they happen in 2018, but normally they happen in late year, October. They were moved up until May or something, or April, just to give advantage to the government, while the opposition was in this complete state of disarray. At that point, the opposition is beginning to disintegrate. All of this political capital and political movement is beginning to disassemble, because a part wants to participate in the elections, a part doesn't. Maybe they all decided, some participated in the regional ones, they lost a lot. So now they were beginning to disintegrate. In 2018, they don't participate in the presidential elections, so Maduro wins just because people say there was a fraud. There was no fraud.
It was just him.
There was just no competition.
Yeah.
There was one guy that was, but yeah, none of the opposition supported the guy, Henry Falcón. And now comes, again, 2019, maybe you heard of the Guaido.
So Juan Guaido, I've heard that name.
Yeah.
But can I just ask, is there any, you said that the Maduro government was in control of the writing a new constitution or something like that.
Yeah.
But they ended up not doing that. Is there any indication why they didn't
they were probably just happy with the Constitution as is. They created this as a political maneuver to stop the protests that were arising.
Okay.
That had no clear goal, but had clearly the sentiment to try to overthrow the government. And then they also now had the power to write laws, which they hadn't because Congress had been annulled some years prior. So now they had all the control over all the branches of power. They stopped the protests. It was tactically, politically, it was a genius tactic. It just happens to be very morally fraught.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Guaido.
Yeah, so now Guaido enters the picture. Since the opposition doesn't recognize the 2018 presidential election, in the absence of, in a situation of a power vacuum, the president of Congress takes over. Guaido happened to be the president of Congress. By the way, a completely unknown political figure before that event. He then declares, hey, I'm the new president of Venezuela. And the US and Europe back this effort. Trump was in his first term back then. And that doesn't work. The guy eventually just fizzles out. There was another, in 2018, there was a murder attempt against the president, a drone attack that tried to, it failed again, but it was kind of incompetently done. He got lucky. So 2019 happens, that happened. There were protests, but luckily enough, now they're not going deadly. They're not attempting to try to push through the National Guard to try to get, I don't know where. They were not even close to the presidential palace most of the time, but it was kind of, I don't know how to comment on this, on how, I remember my fellows classmates participating in them, and I would see this anger and this bravado. We gotta fight the National Guard and to pass through, defeat them, but I didn't see defeat them. What does that even mean? What happens? Say you breach through, you still need like an hour walk to the presidential palace.
Okay.
It's like a it had like a, when you're it felt very much like, hey, when you're in the middle of this idea that the country is this horrible place, which in many ways it was, uh, and you have to fight the dictatorship, like somehow that fantasy needs to be enacted in a way, and it was playing out, and this imagery, especially when you see the strongholds of the opposition, they look completely dystopic. So it's like the enacting of this, but without ultimately the concrete effort that could actually bring it to the past the touchdown touch line or touchdown line. It was very interesting. But now also you can also see that the more time passes, the harder it is to simply say, well, this is anti-democratic as a protest, because well, the government has also become so corrupt that we're amidst this war, and like, well, maybe it is now righteous to overthrow the government after so many crimes have been committed. And so just to say, at this point, we're deep into the fog of war, even though we're about to come out a bit. But it's just tragic, man.
Yeah.
It's just tragic.
Yeah, it sounds like a very difficult time.
Yeah. And I was not there personally present for the Guaidó situation, but I left in 2018 to do my master's degree. So now I will tell you mostly from outside, but still following closely.
Sure.
But yeah, as I mentioned, Guaidó attempts to take over. He fails. Then 2020, there was a Gideon operation. There was a small group of U.S. militaries or ex-military. Maybe it was a private security group, but they tried to come in, and the government detected them early somehow, and they were just stopped. And okay, that was that. Then you had essentially some years of some degree of peace and calm. The opposition by now is completely disintegrated, because you had two branches: those who wanted to partake more in elections, those who thought, what's the point, we have to fight the dictatorship, and the movement to put Guaidó, the people who led that, Leopoldo López, they essentially strong-armed the opposition and into doing that. And after that, the opposition sort of disintegrated, from my perspective. They haven't been a cohesive unit since then.
Did they disintegrate into now multiple different factions of political parties, all advocating for different things, or are they still? But are they still? Do they still have a unifying idea around we need to get rid of this dictatorship, or are
Partly.
there factions that want to that say things like, oh, we want to work within the system, basically?
Also, work within the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's sort of all different sort of ideas. Okay.
Exactly. And but they lost the cohesiveness, the cohesive umbrella, and so after that, essentially the country works fine. Economy begins improving in 2018. They released the price of the dollar. They let go. They stopped controlling it, and they stopped being actually a bit more capitalistic. They let's let the private sector generate part of the wealth, most of the wealth, and the country actually improved a lot. It's very nice to see the increase in quality of life that it has gone through, even though it's definitely not enough. The economy contracted it was like 25% of what it was after the crisis than when it started. So a huge, spectacular contraction, and then slow, but sustained, not even so slow, sometimes fast, and sustained increase, but definitely not fast enough. So a lot of people are struggling. Yeah. And incomes, in 2023, I think, there was a opposition calls for primaries to elect for the presidential 2024 election. And Maria Corina, the protagonist of the opposition in these years, wins with a little more of over 2 million votes. And she, which, by the way, out of 30 million people, just to say, I don't know exactly what happened. She represents the most, radical wing of the opposition, for sure. The one that hates the most the government amongst other leaders, but she's one of them. And so she wins, but I don't think that's representative of the opposition sentiment even. It's just
this
2.5 million maybe people who voted. But she wins, and then in 2024, you have the elections. There's a lot of irregularities. Well, not irregularities, sorry. She couldn't participate, but she had also called, I think the reason is that she had called for sanctions for the country which were put in place and were preventing us from selling our oil and severely damaged our economy. So, I mean, it's just an action that in any reasonable country would be considered treason.
So she was actively calling, I assume, countries like the United States, to sanction her own country, to try and squeeze out the government. Current government.
Yeah, and in the process, ended up squeezing out, or rather, putting its own people under a lot of strain.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But that was the goal. Yeah, absolutely. The argument is, you can't fund the narco dictatorship. We got to remove the resources that they use to stay in power. And
can I actually just ask?
Yeah.
There are claims now of Maduro being the head of some giant drug cartel. Is there any truth to what is the role of drugs in Venezuelan society and in the export of potential drugs? Like what's going on there from your view?
Yeah, I can say a few words on that. The quick answer is I think it's a complete lie.
Okay.
That's the most, let's say blunt one. I have seen no credible evidence that Maduro has any involvement in drug dealing. Again, it's partly my opinion, but I definitely have not seen any credible evidence.
Okay.
And Venezuela does not produce any drugs in a meaningful sense. It's all come from Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the drug passes by us.
Mm-hmm.
There are arguments just to, I can reference official authorities, like the DEA does not recognize the Cartel of the Soles, of the Suns, as an official. They don't register as a thing, as a cartel for them.
Is that a
the DEA? That's the cartel that allegedly Maduro leads.
Okay.
So Maduro allegedly leads the Cartel of the Soles and Tren de Aragua. The DEA does not recognize the Cartels of the Soles as a thing that exists.
Okay, interesting.
And even now, the indictment that they released, so there's a 2020 indictment to capture Maduro. Once they kidnapped him a little over a month ago, or maybe almost exactly a month ago, maybe less, they released a second indictment in New York. And in this new one, so in the first one they mentioned, I think it's 20 or 30 times, the Cartel of the Soles. In this one, I think they mentioned it 5. And they clarify in a way. They say, well, this Cartel of the Soles is not a cartel, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of they call it a patronage system.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling I get is that they're borderline saying, it's more of a vibe. It's like an oddly corrupt political system that we're going to call a cartel. But they had to back up the claim because they could not, it seems, I suspect, they could not hold it in court.
Yeah.
So it's not particularly smart to try to hold a claim you can't sustain.
Sure.
And they decided, okay, let's just put some other charges or other claims. But again, of course, I'm reading into the things, so it's my opinion. But again, I think it's telling, the fact that they immediately back off with regards to that claim.
Which, to be fair, this is just
Yeah.
my own view, which I don't understand. Like I don't necessarily understand how any government can go into another country, capture its leader, and then try to indict him on laws of that country. Like that, to me.
I suppose the U.S. government could say, they're saying we don't recognize him.
Right.
He's violating our own laws because he's helping drug dealing into our country.
But he wouldn't be under the jurisdiction of the U.S. law. That's only my point. This is a question of international law.
I have no idea.
Which I know somewhat, a little bit, but not much. I just want to make that point and
no, that's fair.
And put out there how absurd I think the situation is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I find it immoral and illegal, but we can get, I can also say, since that's also one of the, main topics in current times. Maybe I can say first, what I find funny is, the Cartel de los Soles is the main claim to kidnap Maduro. They are drug dealing into our country. The boats that we're bombing are directly controlled by Maduro. which that there is like zero evidence of. And immediately as they capture them, they say, well, actually, the cartel doesn't exist exactly.
Right.
It's not a cartel. It's like
Right.
they're sponsoring some people. So it's extremely fishy. I don't know what will happen. I hope he's declared not guilty, but it's complicated. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So-
I think it's a weak case, and we can. Yeah. Go ahead.
So just before maybe we get into the current situation, because I want to ask you about
Yeah.
this current state of Venezuela after the capture of Maduro. I know the regime is still in power, right? His vice president is still in power, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, definitely.
So the regime is still very much in place.
Very much intact.
So, but
Yeah.
before we get into that, I just want to make sure that you feel fully satisfied with the explanation of the Maduro regime and what's been going on leading up to this time now, right?
What do you mean the explanation?
Well, no, just like the history leading up to where we are right now, before moving on to where we are right now.
No, I'm happy in a way. Like, are you happy with the summary?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, and in fact, yeah. So, okay. So as I was telling you, yes, we ended the Guaidó period, as I mentioned, and now we start the Maria Corina period in a way. She wins the primaries.
Yep.
We had a period of no major authoritarian events in between. Between 2019 and 2023, the economy was improving. Politics is less authoritarian. The opposition is also scattered. And now we can begin the Maria Corina chapter, where she wins the primaries first and then runs to be president. There's someone who runs for her in the election because she, as I mentioned, she was not allowed to participate in it. Edmundo González is the candidate, and yes, I suppose the main controversy of the election is that maybe you remember that I mentioned that the electoral machines during elections give out tallies to the witnesses in an election, so that they can compare the results to the electoral colleges. Maria Corina claims that they gathered those throughout the country and that they posted them on a website, and that with those results she claims she wants essentially 70-30, more or less, while the government claims they want 51-40, something like that. I don't know what to make of it. There's been enough, let's say, the generation of the state so that that's possible. There were hackings during the event so that the National Council never offered even results segregated by a location. But these are like third-party, even checked hacking. Like Anonymous also took responsibility and whatever. And so the government just has like the total amount as evidence. But then again, it used to be, and I think it is on a technical aspect, very robust as a system. But it's just hard to know. Maybe the government has degenerated enough so that they can't be trusted. At the same time, Maria Corina was one of the people who led, in a way, during the 2004 recall referendum, for instance, the efforts to that created the distrust in the system. I think she's not, so I wouldn't trust her necessarily. I definitely don't trust her. But so that happened, and well, the government stayed in power, and that a year later, that led to the events essentially of, or a year and somewhat more, year and a half, to the events of January 3rd of this year, 2026, where, Maduro was essentially kidnapped. And on a positive note, in a way, given that, I can also say that, in a sense, there may be a silver lining, in the sense that, oddly enough, before this event, there was no political capital in the U.S. to do, to improve relationships with Venezuela. We were sanctioned. There was no way. No one wanted to help us. Essentially, most Venezuelans who oppose the government, or a lot of them, go to the U.S. For sure, almost all the Venezuelans who go to the U.S. are middle class. Middle class tend to code for opposition. And once you're there, you also get to reinforce in your opposition. So a decent majority of people, Venezuelans there, are strong opposition to Maduro. And they also find alliances with the Cubans and the Nicaraguans, and there's a very strong anti-socialist hatred, anything associated to Fidel, all of them they hate, and they have a very strong lobby in the U.S. and so they have a hold of, like, they have influenced the politics of plenty of congressmen who, by default, will simply say, "Oh no, we can't support the dictatorship and the human rights abuses." And so just to say, there was no political climate in which to negotiate with the government. But after the event happened, like Trump has a scalp to show, and can claim, "Oh, now they are answering to our demands," even though I have yet to see a single thing that happened that would not have happened without the attack. The political prisoners, and I call them political prisoners, maybe quote unquote, because some of them were just criminals who committed political crimes, or for political reasons, rather. Some of them were political prisoners, because there definitely are political prisoners as well. It's just a complicated reality of war. Like, it's
political prisoners in the Maduro regime captured, or
yes,
or okay, I see.
Yes. People who were falsely accused of committing crimes against the government.
Okay.
That's absolutely. I mean, I cannot believe that would not be the case that happened. There's also severe constraints on freedom of speech, so that if you oppose severely the government, there can be either fines, or you can end up being a conspirator in jail somehow. But there's also, I say that, but there's also enough freedom of speech so that it's very easy to find an opposition newspaper or an opposition web page. Like, it's not like there's definitely enough opposition. It's just that, well, some of these media, the media tried to overthrow the government back in the day, and then they remained very radical, and in the process, the state degenerated and put more constraints on freedom of the press than was necessary. And
yeah.
And we're in the middle of that.
No, I was just going to ask, like, is there any indication of how the Venezuelan people are reacting to the capture of Maduro? Are they? Is it very polarized, bifurcated, different, or is there some societal upheaval, whether it be pro or against? Like, what's the situation?
I can tell. Well, I will tell you about that, and I will first just finish. Now that I think about it, one remark I wanted to finish is, now there is the political space. Now Trump can claim, "Hey, we have them under control," and now economic relations can be reestablished, and that's a good thing, because the oil, they seem to not be stealing our oil, but just selling it at market price and giving us the money. Sometimes apparently they want to pass it through some treasury account, but to reinvest it in the country.
Even though Maduro's regime is still in power.
Maduro's regime is still in power.
Okay.
So
yeah.
For all practical purposes, nothing has changed. Now it's just that now there is a message that can be sold to the American constituency and the political class.
Of course.
And now, with regards to what you mentioned, Venezuela is right now, like, immediately after that, it was completely stable. Like, the government was always in control of the situation. They presented a completely united front. And if only there were a lot of pro-government sentiments and rallies. The government called a lot of its rallies, and I'm sure there, in social media, you would see a lot of people who definitely were celebrating this event, and they were extremely happy that Maduro was removed. And I'm sure there is part of the people in Venezuela who will feel that as well. It's just that, one, I don't know how big of the portion they are. Two, they will definitely feel more afraid to express their sentiment, fearing retaliation, and especially in the environment where, okay, now the government's going to be trying to catch anybody who was part of the conspiracy.
Sure.
And so it's hard to say. But of course, the pro-government sentiment was there, and it was obviously present. And right now, the situation in the country is somewhat optimistic, at least economically. It's politically stable. And, well, it really depends on how much force Trump will be willing to use to try to overthrow what is there right now, or if instead he'll be happy to say, you know what, we can do business as usual and just make some money and have another ally state at no cost, essentially. So that's the two potential realities. Because if he wants to use force to remove the government, I don't see how without an invasion or without severe, I don't know, violent upheaval. I don't know. I don't see.
Sure.
Because the government, it has some support. I don't know what support remains for the government. It's become more unpopular over time. But
is it maybe a potential case that the U.S. might work with the opposition in Venezuela right now, and this woman?
I doubt it.
Or is the opposition still too fragmented?
It's too fragmented. Yeah,
Okay.
Maria Corina had a movement. She managed to unite part of the sentiment, but even most of the opposition was still divided. As the political parties, they were not. From my perspective, it's clear that they are not happy to simply coalesce around her.
Okay.
Because even in the election last year, you could see the fractures within. And so she's not like this unifying figure for the opposition by any means. But he did coalesce a sentiment to try to participate in the election once more that had been gone for a while. And so that she did accomplish. But also, after what happened last year, or 2 years ago, a year and a half, most of her party was dismantled, partly put in jail for trying to conspire against the country, or maybe they were rightfully defending a legitimate result and they were simply politically put in jail. I can't tell. But essentially her movement is somewhat dismantled. The rest of the opposition is very fractured. So I don't see no way in which Trump could work with the opposition to try to form a stable coalition that would supplant the current government. And so they're really tied to the government, and it seems like they're happy to do so. Funnily enough, Trump doesn't seem to be particularly dogmatic in that sense, so that's good news in a way. And so let's see, in a way, there's hope for the country that hadn't been there before. But maybe the one thing we would be missing is a better unified narrative. So what I've told you about a bit today is my best effort, which I'm sure is still full of biases, but it's definitely an effort to build some unified narrative, to say that it's not simply a dictatorship, it's not simply, the oligarchy trying to overthrow the government. It's just the tragedy of war in a way, and polarization, and maybe maybe within that narrative we're able to build something that transcends it, something that goes past and is able to look past the crimes of the other and forgive and try to build something looking forward. So I think that's what we're missing, and now we have the opportunity that is at least economic in nature, and let's see what role Trump plays, because he's a bit of a wild card. So I think that's the current status from my perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I appreciate you telling me all about it. I certainly learned a lot.
That's awesome.
But I have to do even more research and trying to figure out.
Feel free to do that and question whatever I said. Yeah,
for sure. I appreciate it, Adrian.
Perfect then. Thank you very much, Mike. This was a great time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great.
It was awesome.